In the frantic pace of today's society, we easily recognize a familiar picture. Early mornings, crowded streets, streams of people rushing to work. Everyone's eyes are hurried, and their hearts seem perpetually restless with worry. Young people yearn to assert themselves, diving into studies and work with the desire for position and fame. Older people fret about finances and family, hoping their children have enough and their homes are comfortable, with even minor tasks becoming burdens. This is because the mind always wants more, better, higher. As if there's a bottomless bag in our hearts. No matter how much we put into it, it's never enough. Some ask, why are we so exhausted? Is it because work is too stressful or life is too full of changes? But if we look deeper, perhaps what causes our suffering isn't in our circumstances, but within our own minds. We long to be loved more, to be recognized, to have wealth and fame, to have a complete family. These desires in themselves aren't bad, but when we relentlessly chase them without ever pausing to know when enough is enough, weariness and disappointment are inevitable. In the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha clearly pointed out that the cause of suffering is craving. When our minds give rise to desires, it means we are creating an invisible burden for ourselves. The more we want to possess, the more we fear losing it. The more we crave success, the more anxious we become with failure. Thus, suffering doesn't come from external factors, but arises from our own ceaseless wanting. The Buddha once compared craving to drinking seawater. The more you drink, the thirstier you become, never truly satisfied. People often mistakenly believe that having more money brings happiness, and having status brings peace. But in reality, these very desires bind us in an endless cycle of worries. If we pay attention, we'll see that in daily life, our suffering often doesn't stem from anything grand. A diligent person who isn't praised by their boss immediately feels upset. Someone who loves, but isn't fully reciprocated, instantly feels a heavy heart. A family with plenty, yet wanting more, ultimately argues because they didn't get what they desired. It all originates from the mind, always thinking we need more, instead of being grateful for and cherishing what we have. So, perhaps the solution isn't to stop working or stop striving for a better life, but to change our perspective. When we desire less and don't place our happiness in things beyond our reach, our hearts naturally become lighter. Living in a small house filled with love is sometimes happier than living in a luxurious but cold mansion. Sharing a simple meal with family is sometimes much more peaceful than a lavish but superficial party. The Buddha's teachings don't tell us to give up everything, but merely remind us to let go of excessive desires. When our hearts know contentment, we will discover simple joys everywhere. Every leisurely step, every warm meal, every sincere word can become a source of happiness. That is the door that leads us out of the endless thirst of craving, showing us that peace is not far away, but resides within the tranquility of our own minds. My dear friend, have you ever wondered why people want more and more the more they have? When we have nothing, we only wish for a roof over our heads, a stable job to support ourselves and our family. But once we have them, the mind refuses to stop. It wants a bigger house, a more prestigious job, a more abundant life. That desire never ceases, like an endless river. We keep going without ever finding a harbor. That is the true nature of craving. Like a bottomless bag, the more you put in, the emptier it feels. In Buddhist teachings, this is explained very clearly. The Buddha once taught that the root of suffering is boundless craving. For the human mind is inherently easily swayed by the illusion of pleasure and happiness found in material things. In truth, happiness derived from material possessions is only temporary. When we achieve something, we rejoice for a moment. But soon after, it feels ordinary. And then the mind begins to want more. It's like a thirsty person drinking seawater. The more they drink, the thirstier they become, never truly satisfied. The law of karma also reminds us of the truth that wealth and prosperity are subject to circumstances. Tui duyen, not something that can be forced. Some toil diligently their entire lives, planning everything, yet never prosper. Conversely, some don't strive for too much, but are met with favorable conditions. Thanks to accumulated good karma from many lifetimes, they naturally encounter luck and prosperous business. If we understand karma, we'll clearly see that not all desires come true, and the more we force things, the more suffering we invite. The story of Mr. Tuan is perhaps a relatable example for us to ponder. Mr. Tuan had a stable job with a decent salary, and his life was generally comfortable. Initially, he bought a motorbike for commuting, but then seeing his friends ride modern scooters, he tried hard to buy one too. Once he had a scooter, he started thinking about a car because in his eyes, only a car could signify success. The same went for his home. From an apartment perfectly suitable for his small family, he began to dream of a larger, more luxurious house. His desires piled one after another. Before he could even be satisfied with his current situation, he was already rushing towards the next thing. The climax was when he decided to take on debt to buy a house far beyond his means. In the months that followed, his family fell under the pressure of debt repayment. He and his wife constantly argued over money, and their children were also affected by the heavy atmosphere at home. Some nights, he tossed and turned, unable to sleep, thinking about the big, beautiful house he owned, yet feeling no peace in his heart. What he had desired was there, but his suffering was even greater than before. His story serves as a vivid illustration of the Buddha's teaching on craving. Craving is like a bottomless bag. The more you try to fill it, the emptier it feels. The more you have, the more you lack. If we look closely, we'll see that not just Mr. Tuan, but we ourselves, to varying degrees, fall into this spiral. A new item bought is boring after a few days. A goal achieved feels ordinary. And then another goal is set. The mind never stops, and thus suffering never ceases. This doesn't mean we shouldn't dream or strive. But what's important is that we need to know when to stop, to know when enough is enough, and not let desires completely dominate our lives. The Buddha's teachings advise us to practice living simply and appreciating the present. When we are grateful for what we have, our minds naturally desire less and feel less anxious. Instead of comparing ourselves to others, let's learn to look within ourselves and cherish every little thing. A simple meal, yet full of togetherness with family, can sometimes bring more complete joy than lavish parties lacking love. A small house, but warm with familial affection, can sometimes be more valuable than a vast, cold mansion. You see, when the mind knows contentment, happiness naturally appears. But when the mind never knows contentment, even if you hold the whole world in your hands, your heart will still feel empty and lonely. Therefore, instead of chasing endless desires, stop and feel the peace right in the present moment. When we desire less, we truly touch tranquility, and suffering naturally dissolves. In everyday life, perhaps one of the deepest forms of suffering is when we place our trust and expectations in someone, only to be met with disappointment. Many have tearfully exclaimed, "I treated them so well. Why did they treat me like that?" That question sounds simple, yet behind it lies a heart broken by disappointment. When people enter life, everyone hopes to find sincere relationships, friendship, love, collegiality, family bonds. And in those relationships, we often expect others to treat us the same way we treat them. However, reality rarely unfolds as we wish. Buddhists often say that life is a sea of suffering. A part of that suffering stems from our expectations of others. We expect them to care. We expect them to understand. We expect them to share. But the more we expect, the more easily we fall into disappointment. This is because the human mind is inherently impermanent. No one can live according to our desires. The Buddha once taught that in this life, two things cause people the most suffering. One is not getting what one wants, and the other is getting what one wants and then fearing its loss. When we expect others to act according to our wishes, it means we are binding our own hearts, and then even a small change is enough to destabilize our peace. Ms. Lan, a kind and benevolent woman, is an example of this. She had a close friend named Huang, and the two had been inseparable since school days. Over the years, Lan always wholeheartedly helped Huang, from small matters like lending a bit of spending money to big things like finding a job or introducing business partners. Lan did all these things without calculation, but deep down, she harbored an expectation that this friendship would always be strong, and that when she was in difficulty, Huang would be by her side. Then one day, Lan fell seriously ill and had to be hospitalized for several days. During that time, what she longed for most was the sharing and care from the friend she trusted. However, Huang only visited briefly, didn't even stay long, and showed little concern for the pain Lan was enduring. In that moment, Lan felt a pain even greater than her illness. It wasn't because Huang did anything to harm her, but because Huang didn't do what she expected. Disappointment accumulated, and years of trust suddenly seemed to crumble. But if we look with a mindful eye, we'll see that Huang wasn't wrong. It was just that Lan had placed too many expectations. Everyone has their own life, their own worries, and their own limitations. It's not that if we are good to them, they will have the ability and willingness to reciprocate exactly as we wish. What causes our suffering isn't the actions of others, but our own desires placed upon them. The Buddha taught that the deep root of disappointment in relationships is our failure to understand impermanence and to accept the changing nature of people's minds. The human mind transforms hour by hour, day by day, like floating clouds like flowing water. Today, they may be happy. Tomorrow, they might be sad. Today, they might be ready to help us. Tomorrow, they might forget due to their own worries. That is normal in the flow of life. If we keep trying to cling on, keep wanting others to be as we imagine, it's like holding a block of fire in our arms, only to burn ourselves. So what must we do to no longer suffer from expectations of others? The answer lies in letting go. Not letting go of emotions, nor living indifferently, but letting go of the mind that expects too much. Continue to sincerely love, but don't let your happiness depend entirely on how others treat you. When we give without expectation, we will feel a lightness in our hearts. When we help others with a mind free of craving, we will receive peace in return. Regardless of whether the other person reciprocates, in practice, we can start by observing our own minds. Whenever we feel annoyed because someone isn't acting as we wish, ask yourself, am I expecting too much from them? Take a deep breath, exhale gently, and remind yourself that everyone has their own journey. We cannot control others' minds. We can only control how we react. As we gradually adopt this habit, we will find disappointment receding, replaced by compassion. And you will also realize a wonderful thing when we expect less from others. Relationships naturally become lighter. Friendships, love, and family bonds are then no longer bound by expectation, but nourished by freedom and sincerity. Others come to us not out of pressure to reciprocate, but because they truly want to. And it is at that moment that the connection becomes deep and lasting. The pain of disappointment in social relationships doesn't originate externally, but from our own excessive expectations. When we understand this, we will learn to open our hearts, accept, love, but without attachment. That is also a firm step on the path of letting go, to make the mind less volatile and life more peaceful. When we learn to let go of expectations of others, we will see that true peace doesn't lie in the reciprocation of others, but in the tranquility of our own minds. My dear friend, if you pay a little attention, you'll notice many people around us always live in a state of unease, simply because they never feel they have enough. Some have high monthly salaries, but still complain they don't have enough to spend. Some have spacious homes and ample possessions, but remain sad because they feel inferior to friends. There are even those who work their entire lives accumulating wealth, yet at the end of their lives, they still worry about loss and lack. That whirlpool keeps the mind constantly stretched, never allowing for peace. That is the suffering of those who haven't learned the lesson of contentment. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful word, tri tuk, meaning knowing enough, or contentment. Tri tuk doesn't mean not working or not striving, but rather in any circumstance, knowing how to appreciate and find joy in what one has. The Buddha once taught that one who knows contentment finds peace even lying on the ground, while one who does not know contentment is dissatisfied even in heaven. Just that one saying is enough for us to ponder for a lifetime. The contented person lives amidst hardship with an unperturbed heart, while the discontented person lives amidst luxury with a dissatisfied mind. Consider two contrasting images. One person chases money every day, their endless greed never stopping. They buy a lot, accumulate a lot, But when they look around, they always see others who have more, leading to envy and dissatisfaction. Meanwhile, another person has only a small home and a job sufficient for living, yet their heart is always joyful because they have their health, their family, and can do what they love. This second person embodies contentment. They don't need to have everything because they understand that happiness doesn't come from possessing much, but from inner peace. There's a folk saying, "One who desires nothing naturally elevates their character." To desire nothing doesn't mean having no wishes, but rather not being bound by those wishes. When the heart is unburdened and free from competition, one's character naturally becomes noble, compassionate, and wise. Because those who desire nothing no longer scheme over gain or loss, nor are they swayed by greed. Their souls are as light as clouds in the sky, sowing peace wherever they go. The story of Uncle Nam, who sells rice noodle soup, is a simple yet profound illustration of the spirit of contentment. Uncle Nam has a small noodle shop at the corner of the market, with a steady stream of customers every day. His noodles aren't overly famous, but they're good enough for regulars to enjoy, and sufficient for him to support his family and send his children to school. Some people, seeing this, advised him to expand, invest more capital, rent a bigger space, and heavily promote to earn a lot of money. But Uncle Nam just smiled gently. "I have enough to support my family, and a little left over for charity. That's enough. Becoming big doesn't guarantee my peace of mind. I like spending my mornings calmly cooking a pot of noodles, with just enough customers coming to eat. Then in the afternoon, I still have time to sit and drink tea, chat with neighbors. That's true happiness." It sounds simple, but within that simplicity lies wisdom. Uncle Nam understood that life is short, and chasing too much only makes one more tired. The precious thing isn't how much money you have, but living peacefully, having time for family, and having a heart to share with those less fortunate. That's why his face was always radiant. And customers came to his shop not just for the delicious noodles, but also because they felt the warmth from his heart. If we reflect carefully, we'll see that many wealthy people out there might not possess the same peace of mind as Uncle Nam. They are busy, stressed, even needing tranquilizers to sleep. While Uncle Nam has only a simple noodle stall, he sleeps soundly, and his smile is full. The difference doesn't lie in circumstances, but in a contented mind. In daily life, to practice contentment, we can start with very small things. When eating a meal, instead of complaining that this dish isn't tasty, or that dish doesn't suit our palate, let's be grateful that we have food to eat and someone to cook for us. When stepping out, instead of envying others driving luxury cars, let's remember that having healthy legs and a means of transportation is already a blessing. When we look back at what we have, from our home, family, friends to our health, we'll realize that life has truly given us so much. The lack doesn't lie externally, but in our own bottomless greed. Buddhist teachings state that a contented mind is often peaceful, while a discontented mind constantly chases desires and suffering. When we understand this, we'll see that spiritual practice isn't about going to a pagoda or chanting for hours, but lies in how we live each day. To be content, live simply, and avoid competition. That is, practice. Try once to sit down, breathe slowly, close your eyes, and ask yourself what you truly need to be happy. You might realize you don't need as many things as you thought. A peaceful family, a job that provides enough, a giving heart. That's already more than enough for a meaningful life. The contented person lives amidst life with a tranquil soul. The discontented person, even at the pinnacle of fame, feels lonely and uneasy. Therefore, true happiness isn't about having much or little, but about knowing contentment. And when you are content, you will naturally feel light, no longer comparing yourself to others, no longer swept away by desires. That is the path that leads us to serenity. When the mind knows contentment, we will understand that happiness already exists in every simple moment of life. Just open your heart and you will see it. Sometimes in life, we don't suffer because of the present, but because we keep clinging to what has passed. There are old memories, irreplaceable recollections, yet we hold on to them tightly out of habit. People often say that all wounds heal with time, but that's not truly the case. Some physical wounds scar over, but if we don't know how to care for wounds of the heart, they will fester for years. Some people live in the present, but their souls remain trapped in the past. It is this attachment that prevents them from finding peace, from opening their hearts to embrace new things. And Ms. Han was such a person. She had suffered for years simply because she couldn't let go of a withered wedding bouquet. Ms. Han once had a beautiful marriage that many admired. On her wedding day, she radiated like a flower, holding a fresh bouquet, her eyes sparkling with happiness. Everyone who saw her believed she had found a peaceful harbor. But life is impermanent. That happiness didn't last long. The marriage dissolved amidst disagreements, hurts, and tears. Her partner left, and happiness departed too, leaving only Ms. Han in silence, with painful memories. And what she kept for herself was that wedding bouquet. Initially, she stored it in a wooden box, cherishing it like a treasure. Whenever she reminisced, she'd open it and look at the slowly stiffening, faded flowers. But instead of comfort, it only made her heart ache, and tears would fall. Year after year, that bouquet remained there, a silent witness to a broken love, and also a chain binding her soul. Outsiders might think it was just a bouquet, easily discarded. But for Ms. Han, it was a memory, a part of her youth, the faith she once held. Because she couldn't let go, she turned that dried bouquet into a burden. Just as it's taught in Buddhist Dharma, some people suffer not because of past events, but because their minds cling to what was once joyful, clinging to images, clinging to broken vows. The Buddha once pointed out that human suffering stems from craving and ignorance. We become attached to something, imagining it will last forever, failing to see the truth of impermanence. It is this delusion that binds us to suffering. Once, during a Dharma talk, the teacher explained that the past has already flowed away like a river, never to return. If we keep clutching a dried branch, our hands will never be open enough to receive a newly bloomed flower. Ms. Han listened with tears welling up, knowing deep down that she had been holding on to too many things that no longer existed. That day, upon returning home, she opened the familiar wooden box. Looking at the wedding bouquet, which no longer resembled its original form, she burst into tears. But these were no longer tears of despair, but tears of release. She decided to take out the dried bouquet, along with the old, worthless marriage certificate, and set them on fire. Flames flared, the flowers turned to ash, the paper to dust. She watched the fire as if witnessing the very pain in her heart being consumed. When the fire died down, she felt an extraordinary lightness in her heart, as if a large stone had been lifted from her chest. That moment was a turning point. Ms. Han realized that letting go doesn't mean denying the past, much less being ungrateful for what happened. Letting go simply means no longer allowing the past to control the present, no longer letting memories become shackles. The Buddha once taught that everything in life is impermanent, including happiness and suffering. Happiness comes and goes. Suffering comes and goes. Nothing lasts forever. If we can accept that, we will no longer suffer from what has passed. Letting go of the past is opening a new door for ourselves, cleaning out the room in our hearts to make space for peace and good things to arrive. Reflecting, how many of us are like Ms. Han? We may not hold on to dried flowers, but we hold on to stories, grudges, and old wounds in our hearts. Sometimes we replay a painful memory, harming ourselves. Sometimes not forgiving someone is also not forgiving ourselves. We think that holding on to the past is a way to remember. But in reality, it's just how we lock the door to happiness for ourselves. In the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha taught about suffering and its causes. One of these causes is attachment, the refusal to let go. When the mind clings, suffering persists. When it knows how to let go, suffering dissipates. From Ms. Han's story, we can learn how to let go. First, look directly at the pain. Acknowledge it. Don't deny. Don't run away. Just calmly confront it and ask yourself, is this still useful for my present and future? If the answer is no, then bravely let go. Perhaps we don't burn a dried bouquet, but we can write down our painful memories and then tear them up. Perhaps we don't return a wedding certificate, but we can give old memories back to the past, no longer allowing them to dominate our lives. Letting go isn't easy, but once achieved, we will feel much lighter. In daily life, we can also practice letting go with very small things. When someone hurts us, instead of nurturing resentment, try to forgive. Forgiveness isn't for their benefit, but for the peace of our own minds. When a plan doesn't succeed, instead of agonizing over it, learn to accept and start again. When a relationship ends, instead of clinging to reasons, trust that all unions and separations have their causes and conditions. When causes and conditions are sufficient, we meet. When they are exhausted, we part ways. Understanding this will alleviate inner turmoil and pain. There is a very beautiful concept in Buddhist Dharma: impermanence. Impermanence not only reminds us that life is short, but also gives us the belief that all suffering will pass, just as bitter winter must give way to spring, and long dark nights must end for dawn to break. If we are willing to let go of old things, new light will surely come. And if the mind doesn't cling to the past, suffering will dissipate. And my friend, when recounting Ms. Han's story, we might see ourselves somewhere within it. Everyone has held a dried bouquet in their heart. The important thing is whether we have the courage to burn it, to return the past to the past. Only when we let go can our minds truly open and be ready to receive new, better things. And it is from that point that we will deeply understand the Buddha's teaching. Peace doesn't lie in how much we hold, but in how much we can let go. Letting go is not loss. Letting go is to gain peace. When we are willing to step past the past, we truly enter the present. And it is the present that is the dwelling place, where the soul is nourished. One who knows how to let go is one who loves themselves, who gives themselves the opportunity to live lightly and freely. Do you realize? The moment we dare to put things down is also the moment we begin to walk on the path of joy. And then, suffering will be nothing more than ashes from an extinguished fire. Did you know? In this modern life, one of the biggest reasons people feel tired is because we harbor too many desires. Everyone wishes for a full life, a stable job, a happy family. But sometimes, precisely because we desire too much and place too many expectations on the future, we inadvertently turn ourselves into prisoners of pressure. Some people fail an exam and immediately see it as a lifelong failure. Some who fail to achieve what they want immediately blame themselves, agonizing and wallowing in misery. Desire itself is not wrong, but when desire becomes an unrealistic ambition, it will make our minds agitated, uneasy, and even erode our self-confidence. In Buddhism, this is explained very clearly. The Buddha once taught that the cause of suffering lies in craving and attachment. When we want something excessively, we not only place our hopes in it, but also tie our happiness to that outcome. If we get what we want, we rejoice. But that joy is very fleeting. If we don't, we suffer, even despair. That is the vicious cycle of craving and suffering that people often get caught in. In the Dhammapada, there is a verse, "For one who desires nothing, there is no sorrow. Such a one is unburdened in life, in truth." Desires are a natural part of life. But when we learn to let go of unrealistic desires, we will feel a lightness and serenity in every breath, in every step. There's a very relatable story that this Buddhist Dharma channel wants to share with you. It's the story of Mr. Fong, a man who once sank into the suffering of desire, then learned how to live in harmony with circumstances, Tui Duyen, to rediscover joy. Mr. Fong was a gentle, hard-working young man who, from childhood, had high expectations placed upon him by his family. His parents wished for their son to have a stable job, especially as a civil servant. He himself cherished that dream, believing that a civil service job brought both prestige and long-term security. So, after graduation, he decided to take the civil service exam. The first time he failed, he told himself he would try harder. The next year, he took the exam again, but the result was still not what he expected. This went on for several years. Each failure felt like another defeat. He blamed himself, bemoaned his fate, and at times even thought his life was over. Mr. Fong's pain is also the common pain of many people. We often stake our entire lives on one expectation. If we succeed, we are proud. If we fail, we see it as the end. But in reality, not everyone can follow the path they desire. Life is inherently impermanent. Success or failure also depends on karma and circumstances. The Buddha taught that each person has their own karma and causes and effects, so outcomes cannot be achieved by desire alone. Some sow seeds of effort, but the fruit comes slowly. Some feel like they're taking a detour, but unexpectedly encounter good fortune. Therefore, if we force ourselves to achieve something, we will suffer even more when the conditions are not yet ripe. Fortunately, after years of dwelling in disappointment, Mr. Fong began to change. One day, by chance, he attended a Dharma talk at a pagoda. The teacher explained that a person who knows how to live in harmony with circumstances, Tui Duyen, is one who doesn't chase unreasonable desires, nor passively gives up, but rather appreciates the present and wholeheartedly engages with the conditions they have. Those words made him ponder deeply. He realized that for too long he had only chased one goal, forgetting that life still offered many other paths. So, he decided to stop the stressful exams and dedicated his time to tutoring students in the area. Initially, he thought it was just a temporary way to make a living, but gradually, he found joy in imparting knowledge and seeing his students progress. He also participated in charity activities, helping impoverished children. The strange thing was that ever since he desired less, he found life to be lighter. He no longer tormented himself over failing exams, no longer complained about fate. Instead, he lived joyfully in each moment, finding meaning in the simple work he was doing. And then, surprisingly, precisely because of his dedication and reputation in tutoring, one day he was introduced to a local educational institution. He didn't seek the opportunity found him. Finally, he found a stable job that was even aligned with his expertise and had the meaning of helping others. Looking back, he suddenly smiled, realizing that happiness comes when we no longer relentlessly pursue desires. Mr. Fong's story serves as a vivid illustration of the spirit of Tui Duyen Ni But Bien, adapting to circumstances while maintaining unwavering principles in Buddhism. Tui Duyen means accepting circumstances, going along with the causes and conditions that life brings, not forcing things, not resisting. Bat Bien means steadfastly holding on to a wholesome mind and righteous aspirations. We adapt to circumstances in choosing our path, but we don't abandon the roots of truthfulness, effort, and kindness. Thanks to this, we are neither swayed by circumstances nor bound by unreasonable desires. So how can we learn to live in harmony with circumstances, like Mr. Fong? First, we need to know how to reduce our desires. Instead of placing overly high expectations on an outcome, focus on doing each small task well in the present. Ask yourself, is this truly necessary? Does it make me and others happy? If yes, do it with a complete heart. If not, bravely let go. Second, remember the spirit of impermanence. Everything changes. Nothing lasts forever. Therefore, don't let today's joy or sorrow dictate your entire life. Third, cultivate a mind of contentment. Contentment doesn't mean not striving, but rather, while striving, still being satisfied with what you have, not letting greed dominate. When you practice this way, you will feel much lighter. Failures are no longer devastating wounds, but merely lessons. Successes are no longer pinnacles for complacency, but just another step. When the mind is at peace, life is at peace. When we desire less, suffering naturally dissipates. Like a person rowing a boat, if you constantly try to go against strong currents, you will be exhausted. But if you know how to go with the flow, rowing gently while maintaining direction, you will reach the shore effortlessly. My dear friend, Mr. Feng's story is not just one person's tale. It is also a common lesson for all of us. When we learn to reduce desires and live in harmony with circumstances, joy will come from simple things. Happiness isn't about how much we grasp, but about how much we can let go of what is unnecessary. And sometimes, what we thought was lost is actually the door opening to a new opportunity. Try once to relax your hands and let the current of life carry you, keeping your mind gentle and clear. You will see that life is not as harsh as we imagine. When the mind desires less, that is also when we truly touch the peace that the Buddha taught. And who knows, from within that peace, the best things will quietly find their way to you. My dear friend, if you pay a little attention, you'll see that one of the common sufferings in today's society is the relentless pursuit of material possessions. People work day and night to buy houses, cars, expensive items, and adorn themselves with glittering brand-name goods. Yet, ironically, the more we have, the more we feel we lack. Someone who just bought a new car immediately thinks about upgrading to a more luxurious one. Someone who just built a spacious house yearns for an even larger villa. And when they don't achieve it, they fall into sadness, comparison, and even envy of others. The pressure of money, fame, and societal perception continues to weigh heavily, making many forget what they truly need. In Buddhism, this is a manifestation of greed. Tham, one of the three poisons. Tham, san, si, greed, anger, and delusion, the root of suffering. The Buddha once taught that people suffer because of attachment to self and mine. When we regard wealth and fame as ultimate goals, we will endlessly chase them. But life is inherently impermanent. All material things exist only for a short time. Money we have today may be lost tomorrow. Status that is high today may change tomorrow. Even this body cannot be kept forever, let alone external possessions. Understanding this, we clearly see that the cause of suffering lies not in material things, but in our excessive clinging to them. This Buddhist Dharma channel wants to share a true story with you. It's the story of Mr. Hoa, a man once considered successful in everyone's eyes, but who eventually realized a profound lesson about the true value of life. Mr. Hoa was the director of a large company, owned a grand house, a luxury car, and had hundreds of employees under his authority. Wherever he went, he appeared in a sharp suit, always wearing a Swiss gold watch worth hundreds of millions of Vietnamese dong on his wrist. For him, that watch was not just for telling time, but also a symbol of wealth and status. Every time he looked at it, he felt successful. He believed everyone around him admired him. But to achieve that status, Mr. Hoa had to sacrifice a great deal. He worked day and night, ate irregularly, and was constantly stressed. His wife often complained that he no longer had time for family or children, and his children rarely received their father's attention. He only thought that once his career was stable and he had plenty of money, he would make it up to them. But life doesn't always give us the opportunities we want. One day, Mr. Hoa suddenly collapsed at the company. Doctors diagnosed him with severe heart disease due to years of overwork and mental stress. He had to be hospitalized, bedridden for many months. During those days in the hospital, Mr. Hoa finally had real time to reflect on his life. He looked at the gold watch still on his wrist, glistening. But at that moment, it was useless. It didn't lessen his pain, didn't extend his lifespan, didn't grant him another peaceful day with his wife and children. In those months, confined to a hospital bed, he realized he had missed too much. Family meals, intimate conversations, moments of his young children growing up, all had passed without him even knowing. And now, the precious watch was just a meaningless object because it couldn't buy back time. Mr. Hoa recounted that once in the hospital, his daughter held his hand and said, "Just get healthy again, Dad. Just be with us. We don't need a bigger house or more money." Those words made him cry. For years, he had been obsessed with chasing fame, forgetting that true happiness lay in the moments of togetherness with loved ones. That was the precious, irreplaceable time. Mr. Hoa's story reminds us of the Buddha's teachings. Money is like a venomous snake that can kill if not used correctly. Material possessions are not inherently bad. They only become dangerous when we consider them the ultimate goal. If we know how to use money to nurture our family, to do good deeds, to help others alleviate suffering, then it becomes a wholesome means. But if we regard it as an end in itself, a measure of happiness, then we will suffer because of it. This is because material ambition never has an end point. So what must we do to avoid falling into that whirlpool? First, learn to view material things with a mindful eye. A watch, a house, a car, all are merely means to serve life, not life's ultimate goal. We need a home to live in, a car to travel, money to spend, but don't let them define human worth. Second, remember the spirit of impermanence. This body itself cannot be kept forever, let alone external possessions. Understanding this, we will know how to cherish what is necessary and let go of insatiable desires. Third, dedicate time to values that cannot be bought: family bonds, health, and love. When we spend an evening together with family, when we take the time to listen to a friend, when we take care of our health, these are treasures that no material wealth can equal. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha once reminded us that the wealthiest person is not the one with abundant possessions, but the one with a contented mind, one who knows peace with what they have. Knowing contentment is wealth. Knowing how to let go is peace. Knowing how to share is happiness. These teachings are simple, yet hold the key to escaping the cycle of suffering caused by material ambition. My friend, looking back at Mr. Hoa's story, we might see our own reflection in it somewhere. Perhaps we've never worn a gold watch, but we've stayed up late and woken early, forgetting to eat or sleep, chasing some goal. Perhaps we've never been a director, but we've also neglected family and friends, consumed by work. And then, when we're exhausted, we realize that what we sacrificed might not have been worth it. Don't wait until you're on a hospital bed to regret lost time. Learn to stop, take a deep breath, look around, and realize that true happiness isn't found in expensive items, but in the peace of mind and the love of those around you. When we learn to view material things as means, we will know how to use them correctly so they serve life instead of controlling it. And you will see that when you desire less materially, when you no longer see money as the ultimate goal, you will feel an immense sense of freedom. When the mind is less greedy, life is less suffering. It is then that we truly touch the peace that the Buddha taught. Money is just a means, not an end. One who understands this will live much more freely, peacefully, and happily. There's a strange phenomenon in life today that many of us have surely encountered. It's the image of large houses, brightly lit, fully equipped, yet eerily silent inside. A meal might consist of luxurious and expensive dishes, but each person is absorbed in their own phone. No one laughs, no one speaks, only the sound of spoons and forks touching plates remains. Is that true happiness? When the outside is dazzling, but the inside is empty? How many people in prosperous cities live in grand houses, drive luxury cars, wear valuable jewelry, yet feel their hearts heavy every day? They sigh more than they smile, suffer from insomnia more than restful sleep, and the feeling of loneliness grows day by day, even with loved ones nearby. The Buddha taught that human suffering doesn't necessarily come from material deprivation, but often from insatiable greed itself. People often think that a little more money, a little more power, a little more material possessions will lessen worries and sadness. But the truth is, the more we have, the more we crave. It's like drinking seawater. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. The more you crave, the more exhausted you get. That vicious cycle makes people sacrifice their health, time, and youth. Then, looking back, they realize how many precious things they've lost long ago. In Buddhism, there is a beautiful word, trisaituk. Trisaituk means knowing contentment. A contented person feels warm even in a simple house. They find a meal of vegetables and pickles delicious. A contented person doesn't suffer from a lack of material things. Instead, they cherish what they have in hand. But a discontented person feels uneasy even sitting on a mountain of gold, because their mind is always afraid of loss, afraid of lack, afraid of not being as good as others. The Buddha once taught that true happiness is not about getting everything one wants, but about knowing how to let go of unnecessary desires. When the mind desires less, suffering naturally dissipates. I want to tell you a very relatable everyday story, yet one that holds a profound lesson. It's about Mr. Bin's family in the countryside. Mr. Bin was born and raised in a small village where people primarily lived by farming. His family's life wasn't affluent. Their income mainly came from a few acres of rice fields and a flock of chickens and ducks raised around the house. Occasionally, Mr. Bin would also work odd jobs to earn a little extra money for his children's education. Compared to families in the city, his life might be considered lacking. Yet, every evening when the sun set, Mr. Bin's whole family would gather around a simple meal, sometimes just a bowl of vegetable soup, a plate of savory braised fish, and a little salted eggplant. But the laughter was boisterous. He and his wife would chat about their day in the fields while eating. Their 2 children would chatter excitedly, showing off what fun games they played at school today. The sounds of chatter and laughter echoed across the yard, turning the humble meal into a feast of joy. Seeing that scene, everyone clearly understood that happiness doesn't depend on material abundance, but on people cherishing each other's presence. One time, Mr. Bin had the opportunity to go to the city to work on a construction project. In the evening, the homeowner invited him to dinner. It was a well-off family. The meal was full of delicacies, the furniture luxurious, and the lights dazzling. But what struck him as strange was that throughout the entire meal, hardly anyone spoke a word to each other. The father was busy with his phone. The mother ate while watching TV. And the two children were glued to their tablets. Sitting in that splendid room, Mr. Bin suddenly missed his family's simple meals of vegetables and pickles, the boisterous laughter around their old dinner table. At that moment, he realized a simple yet profound truth. True happiness doesn't lie in expensive food or luxurious surroundings, but in the togetherness and warmth of family affection. Upon hearing this story, I believe many of us will unconsciously fall silent. Because everyone has had moments sitting with loved ones, yet their minds were adrift elsewhere, only to regret it later. Buddhism always reminds us that everything in life is impermanent. Money, status, material possessions, all are like mist and dust, soon unable to be held on to forever. What remains, after all, is just memories, peaceful moments where we truly lived. Therefore, if we keep chasing distant desires and neglect the present moment, no matter how much wealth we have, our hearts will remain empty. There's a very beautiful image I often recall, a child laughing as their father carries them on his shoulders, or a mother's joy upon hearing her child's sincere thanks. These moments cannot be bought with money, nor exchanged for any material possessions. They come from love, from cherishing the simplest things. The Buddha taught that happiness is when we know how to live in the present, not constantly chasing the past or anxiously worrying about the future. When the mind pauses to truly feel the present, then in every breath, in every smile, there is enough peace. You might ask, so how do I practice living simply, knowing contentment, and finding happiness from within? That doesn't mean giving up everything, nor rejecting material things, but changing our perspective. We can still work, still earn money, still strive for a good life, but without placing heavy emphasis on comparison or competition in our hearts. We learn to see value in the small things around us, to practice gratitude for what we have. Every day, when you eat a good meal, be grateful that you have food. Every morning you wake up healthy. Be grateful that you have another day to live. Every time you hear the laughter of loved ones, be grateful that you have each other in this life. Simple happiness isn't about having a lot. It's about the mind knowing how to dwell in what is already available. The wealthiest person isn't the one who owns the most possessions, but the one who desires the least. When endless craving ceases, we will find our hearts light. When we stop chasing external material things, we will turn inward and realize that true happiness has always resided within our own hearts. So, if today you still feel uneasy due to some lack, try to pause for a moment. Look at what you have. Smile at the presence of loved ones. Appreciate a simple meal, an afternoon spent watching clouds drift by. Don't think that happiness is a distant thing, because in truth, It's right before your eyes, just waiting for you to recognize it. And when you know how to dwell in these simple joys, you will feel a profound peace. That is peace that doesn't come from material things, doesn't come from possession, but comes from the stillness of the soul. Once the mind is at peace, suffering has no place to cling. It can be said that happiness isn't about seeking more, but about turning inward to realize that we already have enough. And when we know contentment, we will find our hearts free and light, like a bird soaring in the clear sky. There is a kind of suffering that almost all of us have experienced to some degree, the suffering that comes from resentment. When anger lingers in our hearts, when we constantly recall harsh words exchanged, when we deeply engrave the image of someone who once hurt us, our heart feels like it's carrying a heavy stone. We might live in a bustling city, have all conveniences, but as soon as we meet or remember that person, all peace vanishes, and our hearts become agitated again. Some people live their entire lives without forgiving, carrying that resentment with them to the grave. And sometimes, the cycle of hatred can extend through many lifetimes. The Buddha taught that hatred is like a fire. The more you hold on to it, the more it burns your heart and mind. And only love and forgiveness can extinguish that fire. The cause of the suffering of hatred also stems from attachment and an overly inflated ego. In the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha pointed out that suffering is the first truth, and one of the roots of suffering is anger, a resentful mind that refuses to let go. In the cycle of karma, sowing seeds of resentment will yield the fruit of suffering. People often say that holding on to hatred is like picking up a hot coal to throw at someone else. But first, your own hand gets burned. Yet, many still cling tightly to hatred, thinking that holding on to anger will make the other person suffer. Little do they know, the one who suffers first and most is themselves. There's a small, very ordinary village story I once heard that's enough for us to ponder. It's about Ms. Tu and Ms. Lai. Longtime neighbors, their two families were initially quite close, but then a dispute arose over a small piece of land by the road, a matter that seemed trivial. Yet, simply because each wanted a larger share, each believed they were right, the two women developed a deep-seated resentment. They cursed and scoffed at each other, avoiding eye contact. Their children and grandchildren also refused to look at each other because of this. Many years passed, and the entire village grew accustomed to the sight of the two women refusing to yield to each other. And that enmity only grew stronger with time. Until one day, Ms. Tu fell seriously ill and had to be hospitalized for several months. During her days in the hospital, seeing people pass away right after chatting with them that same afternoon, Ms. Tu truly realized, life is too short. Money can't be taken with you, nor can land be carried to the grave. Yet for so many years, I've lived in resentment, making my heart heavy, losing out on simple joys. Upon returning home, she decided to do something she had never thought of in all those years. She knocked on Ms. Lai's door, carrying a basket of fruit, and sincerely apologized. At first, Ms. Lai was stunned, hesitant, unsure how to react. But seeing the truly remorseful and weary look in Ms. Tu's eyes, her own heart softened. From that day on, both women gradually let go of their old animosities, occasionally sitting together to reminisce about old times. And truly, from then on, the expressions on both their faces became much lighter. That story clearly shows us one thing: hatred never brings happiness. It only adds suffering to life and weighs down the heart. Only when we know how to forgive and let go can people truly be free. In Buddhist teachings, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting all faults, but learning to view everything with a compassionate heart. Because everyone in life has made mistakes. Everyone has unintentionally or intentionally hurt others. If we keep clinging to others' mistakes, we are also burying ourselves in a deep pit of suffering. Practicing forgiveness is not easy, because the ego within us always wants comfort, wants revenge, wants to see the other person suffer as we have suffered. But ask yourself, if we constantly seek revenge, constantly sow more hatred, will the cycle of suffering ever end? The Buddha once taught in the Dhammapada, hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is an eternal law. That saying is like a guiding light, reminding us that only by opening our hearts, only by extending compassion, will hatred cease and our souls find lightness. In daily life, if you are harboring any resentment, try once to look back. Ask yourself, what is the point of holding on to that anger? The other person may have forgotten, or perhaps they too are suffering in their own way. As for you, every time you remember, your heart aches and your eyes well up. If you dare to let go, dare to forgive, the first person to be liberated is none other than you. Forgiveness is not a favor you grant to others. It is a gift you give to yourself. You might think forgiveness is difficult, but remember that this life is impermanent. Today here, tomorrow gone. Who can be sure that tomorrow we will still have time to say a gentle word? If we don't let go, when we lie down, will we carry peace or only regret? So don't wait. Don't let time slip away in resentment. Practice opening your heart today. Learn to see everything with a compassionate mind so your heart can be at peace. When you forgive, not only are you liberated, but the other person's heart will also feel lighter. Moreover, that love will spread, mending cracks in relationships, making this life warmer. Life is already short. Don't waste it in hatred. Dedicate the rest of your life to loving, sharing, and living in peace. Forgiveness is the path that leads us out of the cycle of suffering, bringing us back to the freedom of the soul. There are times in life when we think we've tried our best, put in continuous effort, yet the results are not as desired. Loss, failure, being misunderstood by others, or accidentally dropping something important, all these easily make our minds uneasy. Many people have a habit of clinging to past events, lamenting unfair fate, getting angry over losses, and thus tormenting themselves. In reality, it's an undeniable truth of life that some things are beyond our control. The more we cling, the more we agonize. The more we want to hold on, the more suffering we add. That is the vicious cycle that everyone falls into at least once in their life. In the Buddha's teachings, he clearly pointed out that all phenomena are impermanent. Whatever has formed will eventually dissolve. However long we possess something, the day will come to let go. Even this body is not ours forever, let alone external objects. When we hold on tightly, the mind gives rise to suffering. And suffering, in turn, draws in resentment, blame, and dissatisfaction. The Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths, with the first truth being suffering, dukkha, to remind us that life inherently contains suffering, and suffering largely stems from attachment. That's why he advised people to learn how to let go, buông xả, not to passively give up, but to know what to keep and what to release. There's an everyday story that can help us see more clearly the meaning of letting go. In a small village, Mr. Khan worked as a factory worker in a Naishua industrial zone. He had saved up for an entire year to buy a new phone, which he regarded as a valuable possession. One day, on a bus ride, unfortunately, a thief picked his pocket and stole it. Initially, he was furious, regretting it so much that he lost his appetite and sleep, lamenting for a whole week. Every time he thought about it, his heart felt heavy. However, remembering the teachings of the abbot of the pagoda near his home, he suddenly realized that what was lost, no matter how much he regretted it, could not be returned. He asked himself, "What's the point of suffering all week? The phone isn't coming back anyway." He decided to let go, bought a cheaper phone, just enough for communication, and focused on his work. From then on, he felt lighter, worked more efficiently, and slept more soundly. He realized that it was his clinging mind to the loss that caused him suffering, not the phone itself. That story seems trivial, but it contains a great lesson. Often in life, we lose a relationship, an opportunity, a valuable item, and we torment ourselves endlessly. However, if we look deeply into the nature of impermanence, we will see that all things are temporary, coming and going. Letting go is not giving up passively, but the wisdom of knowing that holding on to what is beyond our control is futile. Letting go is choosing to live lighter, more serenely, not letting external circumstances dictate our inner state. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught, "There is no fire like lust, no grip like hatred, no net like delusion, no river like craving." This verse reminds us that suffering largely comes from our own minds, clinging to what is lost, regretting what is no more. Once we know how to let go, we will escape that vicious cycle and find life much less burdensome. In daily life, we can practice letting go little by little. For example, when someone says harsh words to us, instead of holding on to anger for days, try to let go of it in one evening so that you wake up the next day with a clear mind. When there's a mistake at work, instead of endlessly blaming, learn from it and then let it pass. Or when a favorite item breaks, instead of being sad, smile and think that it has fulfilled its role in your life. Each day, choose one small thing to let go of. Gradually, you will find your mind more peaceful, less angry, less dissatisfied. There's an important distinction to make. Letting go, buông xả, is not the same as giving up, buông xuôi. Giving up is surrendering, abandoning everything, making no effort. Letting go, on the other hand, is a state of mindfulness, knowing what is within our capacity to do our best, and what is beyond our reach, and should not trouble us. For example, we can diligently study and work hard, but as for the outcome, let it depend on circumstances. Don't force it. That is, letting go. However, if we don't try at all from the beginning and leave everything to fate, that is giving up. One is wisdom, the other is ignorance. The journey of learning to let go is not always easy, because the human mind is accustomed to holding on, like a hand gripping an object tightly. Letting go initially feels like a loss, but once we get used to it we feel a lightness in our hearts. It's also like cleaning a cluttered room. By getting rid of superfluous items, the space becomes more open. The mind is the same. Letting go makes it more expansive. Desiring less brings more freedom. If we look back, we'll see that many sufferings in this life stem from an unwillingness to let go. A person heartbroken in love keeps yearning for their ex, unwilling to open their heart, so their suffering prolongs. Someone who has lost their job keeps blaming fate, unwilling to find a new direction, so their suffering never ends. A person who lost property keeps harboring resentment towards the thief, unwilling to accept it, so their life knows no peace. Letting go is not to forget, but to free the heart from bondage, to move forward, lightly. Practicing letting go also helps us live in the present. When we know how to release what has passed, we no longer regret. When we don't overly worry about what's yet to come, we are no longer uneasy. At that moment, the present becomes a complete moment where we can breathe, smile, and find happiness in the simplest things. The ancients had a saying, "What is yours will eventually come to you. What is not yours, you cannot keep." That is the principle of living in harmony with circumstances, not forcing things. Letting go is precisely such a way of life, serene amidst all changes, not swept away by external conditions. When we understand and practice this, we will realize that suffering doesn't come from loss, but from the mind's refusal to let go. And with just one act of daring to let go, we will taste the flavor of incredible freedom and tranquility. Therefore, letting go is not just advice. It is the key that opens the door to peace. When we learn to let go, we will find life lighter, our souls expansive, and a natural smile appearing on our lips. And then we will have enough peace to move forward, to embrace the better things that await. You see, sometimes just a small choice between clinging and letting go can change an entire life. There are times in life when people go through many upheavals, endure many losses, to the point of asking themselves why they suffer so much. Some fall into poverty, debt, and mounting pressure. Others suffer from broken relationships, unfulfilled affections, or constant anxiety in their hearts, lie awake with wide-open eyes in the darkness. Still others are plagued by illness, weary day and night, thinking fate is too unfair. Then, in their most desperate moments, they coincidentally discover a path, a peaceful place, or some teaching that suddenly lightens their heart. Many call this Fat Duyen, Buddhist affinity. Fortunate encounter with the Dharma, a propitious connection for people to awaken and learn to take refuge in the light of compassion and wisdom. The Buddha taught that within every sentient being there is Fat Tin, Buddha nature, meaning everyone possesses the seed of enlightenment. But because it is obscured by greed, anger, and delusion, Tham, San, Si, it has not yet manifested, just as the sun always shines, but is covered by dark clouds. The Buddha nature within us is the same. It is always there, waiting for the mind to be less agitated. Then it will shine forth. Fat Duyen is not a gift reserved for a select few, but an opportunity, a condition for that seed to be awakened. When a person opens their heart towards goodness, cultivates a compassionate mind, and learns to let go of hatred and craving, that auspicious connection will naturally find its way to them. The Avatamsaka Sutra states that the mind is like a skilled painter, creating all realms of existence. This means that each person's life is essentially a reflection of their own mind. When the mind is full of schemes, greed, and anger, life is like a dark painting. But when the mind begins to know how to let go and turn towards goodness, that painting comes alive with bright colors. Phat Duyen is the meeting point between a bright mind and favorable conditions in life, from which people rediscover their innate peace. There's a relatable story about Ms. Mai in a small village. She had experienced many misfortunes. Her beloved husband left the family for another woman, leaving her with 2 small children. Then her parents successively passed away in the same year, leaving her feeling empty and lonely. For long nights, she would lie crying in silence, thinking that life was no longer worth living. Her job was unstable, money was scarce, and her children were struggling. Successive hardships weighed down her heart like a heavy stone. One afternoon, on her way home after taking her children to school, she coincidentally passed a small pagoda at the end of the village. The temple bell resonated in the tranquil space, causing her to unconsciously stop. As if drawn by a force, she stepped into the temple courtyard and sat quietly, listening to the nuns chanting sutras. For the first time in months, she felt her heart soften. The complaints and tears seemed to dissolve with each chant. That day, she didn't speak to anyone, but in her heart, she wondered if perhaps she had found Phat Duyen. From that day on, Ms. Mai began visiting the pagoda regularly. Initially, it was just to sit and listen to chanting. Gradually, she practiced holding prayer beads and reciting a few short sutras. The Buddha's teachings gradually permeated her mind, that life is impermanent, that suffering is unavoidable, but people can choose different ways to confront it. She also followed the nun's advice, performing a small good deed each day, such as sharing a meal with a lonely neighbor or teaching her children to be considerate of friends. The more good deeds she did, the more peaceful her mind became. Her sleep deepened, and a smile gradually returned to her face. Acquaintances noticed the change. Everyone said she must have had Phat Duyen, encountering a fortunate connection to transform her pain into inner strength. Ms. Mai's story is also the story of so many of us. There are times when it seems as though life has closed in, but even a small, fortunate connection is enough to open a bright door. The important thing isn't waiting for the connection to come, but cultivating the seed of goodness within the mind. When we live with integrity and keep our minds pure, auspicious connections will naturally find us, just as bees and butterflies naturally visit blooming flowers. Phat Duyen is not an external miracle, but an internal change. When our minds turn towards goodness, know how to love and share, we will naturally encounter good people and favorable circumstances. Some say it's just good luck, but under the light of Buddhist Dharma, it is karma. We sow good seeds, and we will reap good fruits. And the affinity to encounter Buddhist teachings, to meet virtuous teachers, and to find good friends also arises from that. If in life you are feeling suffering and lost, try once to sit silently and recite a Buddha's name, or visit a nearby pagoda. Let the sound of the temple bell and the words of the sutras cleanse the dust from your mind like drops of water. Don't think that Phat Duyen is something distant, only for those with a deep spiritual root. In reality, everyone has Buddha nature. Simply reduce greed, anger, and delusion. Tham, San, See, reduce comparison and craving, and auspicious connections will naturally manifest. The important thing is to let your heart open. When we are closed off, clinging to hatred and greed, even if Fat Duyen knocks, we won't hear it. But when we open our hearts, when we accept that life is impermanent, that suffering is merely a lesson for us to grow, then immediately we will see auspicious connections appearing all around us. A friend offering timely advice, a sutra finding its way into your hands, or simply the distant chime of a temple bell, all can become Fat Duyen to help us awaken. So don't wait for an external miracle. Start from your own mind. Sow seeds of goodness. Cultivate compassion and wisdom. Then auspicious connections will naturally come, just as the morning light dispels the night without being called. And then you will realize that a Fat Duyen is not far away. It is present in every breath, every smile. We only need to open our hearts to receive it. Once the mind turns towards goodness, you will see that seemingly unfortunate things also become opportunities for growth. Losses are no longer burdens, but precious lessons. Tears are no longer despair, but dewdrops cleansing the soul. That is the profound meaning of Fat Duyen, when suffering transforms into a path that leads us to peace. And perhaps, when we realize this, we will truly understand that happiness is not the absence of suffering, but knowing how to transform suffering into the raw material for living serenely. Fat Duyen is not far away, but right in the moment, we know how to return to our own wholesome mind. Therefore, believe that just one good thought, one compassionate smile, one sincere word is enough to open the door for Fat Duyen to enter your life. And then you will see that amidst the impermanent flow of life, there is always a bright path for us to walk with faith and peace. My dear friend, in daily life, perhaps all of us have experienced moments when our hearts felt heavy due to relationships with others. Often, the very people we interact with regularly become a source of distress. It could be a colleague at work, a neighbor, or even a family member. When they treat us unkindly or try to badmouth or belittle us, we easily develop resentment. Our minds become fixated on vexation, and gradually, inner peace vanishes. Many confide that going to work no longer brings joy. They just wish for the day to end so they can go home. Or every time they encounter that person, their heart races and their face flushes with annoyance. This is one of the very real forms of suffering that anyone can encounter. According to Buddhist teachings, all suffering has a cause. The Buddha pointed out in the Four Noble Truths that the cause of suffering is greed, anger, and delusion. Tham, san, se. When we are angry, our hearts are scorched. Anger is like a fire. The more fuel added, the more fiercely it burns, consuming both joy and clarity. We keep thinking the other person is making us suffer, but in reality, it is our own angry mind that is the binding chain. Karma operates fairly. Sowing seeds of resentment yields the fruit of unease. If we choose to maintain a confrontational attitude, the situation will only intensify, and no one will find peace. Conversely, if we learn to transform, to cultivate compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, our own minds will first become lighter, and gradually, the relationship will also change. There's a small story about Mr. Huang that I believe many will find themselves in upon hearing it. Mr. Hoang was a gentle, diligent office worker. However, at his company, he had a colleague who always seemed to be annoyed with him. This person often made disparaging remarks, even gossiped behind his back, making Mr. Hoang so frustrated that he often couldn't sleep. Initially, he just wanted to refute, to prove himself right, and at times even thought of retaliating. But the more he tried to prove himself, the more exhausted he became, and his work also didn't go smoothly. One day, by chance, he went to a pagoda and listened to a Dharma talk. The teacher lectured on the 4 immeasurable minds: loving kindness, 2, compassion, B, sympathetic joy, Hai, and equanimity, Chkse. He began to reflect, asking himself if he had ever truly practiced these states of mind. So Mr. Hoang tried starting with loving kindness. Every time he saw that difficult colleague, instead of reacting, he would silently think, "May he be peaceful. May his mind be free from worries." At first, he found it forced because he still felt annoyed internally. But gradually, after each practice, the anger no longer flared up as fiercely as before. Then he practiced compassion, meaning a heart of pity. He told himself that perhaps the other person also had their own sufferings, which caused them to behave that way. When he thought in that direction, he felt his heart soften. After some time, he also practiced sympathetic joy, which is finding joy in others' happiness. Once, when that colleague was praised by the boss, instead of feeling jealous, he tried to smile and congratulate him. To his surprise, his heart no longer felt heavy, but light. Finally, he practiced equanimity, Ksa, which is letting go, not letting those disparaging words disturb him. He thought that whatever others say is their karma, and maintaining inner peace in his own mind was what truly mattered. As time passed, the colleague seemed to sense the change. Mr. Hoang's attitude was no longer confrontational, but gentle, and he was even willing to help when needed. Gradually, the tension disappeared, and the relationship became more comfortable. Mr. Hoang realized that practicing the 4 immeasurable minds had helped him resolve suffering. And happiness didn't come from others changing, but from the transformation within his own mind. Through this story, we clearly see that when we practice loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, happiness comes naturally. No need to force anyone to change. No need to run from relationships. If our minds are broad enough, all adversities become lessons. A person with a mind of loving kindness radiates loving energy. A person with a mind of compassion is always ready to sympathize. A person with a mind of sympathetic joy knows how to rejoice in the happiness of others. And a person with a mind of equanimity maintains peace amidst all gossip. In daily life, we can apply the 4 immeasurable minds simply. When you see someone suffering, cultivate the wish for them to be free from suffering. When you see someone succeed, sincerely rejoice instead of comparing yourself. When facing adversity, practice letting go, reminding yourself that everything is impermanent. And most importantly, frequently return to your breath to keep your mind clear, not getting swept away by external turmoil. Many think practicing these things is difficult, but in reality, just starting with small actions, a kind wish, a compassionate smile, an attitude of letting go in the face of criticism. All are steps on the path of cultivating the four immeasurable minds. When these wholesome seeds are sown and nurtured daily, the fruits of happiness will naturally bloom. Therefore, happiness is not far away. It doesn't arrive when circumstances change, but resides in how we perceive and respond. Each day, as we open our hearts to embrace loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, suffering will gradually dissolve, and peace will spread not only to us, but also to those around us. You see, with just a shift in mind, the whole world changes. And perhaps the miracle of Buddhist teachings lies precisely in that. It brings us back to our innate, wholesome nature. When we know how to practice the four immeasurable minds, the path to joy opens wide, and suffering no longer has a place to reside in our hearts. Amidst the rhythm of modern life, everyone seems to be racing against time. We wake up hastily, grab a quick breakfast, then plunge into a mountain of work. When the workday ends, we rush through crowded streets. Back home, family worries, children, big tasks, small tasks incessantly follow one another. Then one day, we suddenly realize that we've never truly had a moment to ourselves. Many confide that they always feel empty, even though they are busy every day. They may achieve many things, but joy is gone. This is because life is like an endless cycle, sweeping us along without giving us time to breathe. That is a very common form of suffering in today's era, living hurriedly, living fast, but forgetting how to live deeply in the present. According to the Buddha's teachings, the cause of this suffering lies in our failure to dwell in the present moment. In the Satipatthana Sutta, 4 Foundations of Mindfulness, the Buddha taught about mindfulness, which is being aware in every breath, every step, every action. However, most of us tend to let our minds drift to the past or project into the future. The past is full of regrets, the future full of worries. We rarely truly live fully in this very moment. That is why, even with more conveniences, we still feel tired and empty. Impermanence is the nature of life, but instead of recognizing and appreciating each moment, we let it slip away unconsciously. I want to share a story about Ms. Thao, a teacher. She was a very dedicated person at work, but precisely because of that, she was always busy and stressed. Every morning, she would rush to get ready, eating breakfast while thinking about her lessons, tests, and all the tasks to be done that day. She felt time flew by terribly fast and was constantly exhausted. One day, after attending a Dharma talk, she heard the advice, "Try eating mindfully." It sounded simple, but she wanted to try. That morning, instead of eating and thinking, she sat down, picked up a mouthful of rice, chewed slowly, truly savoring the flavor. Each bite became a new experience. She found the rice fragrant, the vegetables crisp, the soup sweet. All seemed to bring energy to her body and mind. For the first time in years, breakfast was no longer a rushed habit, but a moment of happiness. From then on, she began to practice walking mindfully. In the morning, instead of rushing to school, she walked slowly, listening to the birds singing in the branches, seeing the sunlight spread across the rooftops, and realizing how peaceful everything around her truly was. It turned out that happiness wasn't something distant, but precisely these simple moments if we are truly present with them. Ms. Tao gradually felt a change in her soul. She was less stressed, her face more radiant, and her students also found her more approachable and cheerful. When she recounted this experience, many colleagues tried to follow suit and also found peace in their souls. Ms. Tao's story is proof that if we know how to slow down, we will find happiness right beside us. Happiness doesn't need to be sought in the future, nor is it about grand things. It could be a meal full of togetherness with family, a gentle smile from a loved one, or simply the moment we sit quietly, take a deep breath, and feel our hearts lighten. When the mind dwells in the present, all suffering also subsides. Practicing mindfulness is not something unfamiliar. It simply requires us to bring our minds back to small daily activities. When eating, we know we are eating. When walking, we know we are walking. When working, we know we are working. When speaking, we know we are listening. It is this awareness that helps us escape the spiral of anxiety and fatigue. Many people think that slowing down will hinder progress. But in reality, when we live mindfully, we work more effectively, more clearly, and make fewer mistakes. The important thing is that we must learn to let go of the habit of living hastily. Try once to put your phone away during a meal, so your mind is entirely dedicated to the food and your loved ones beside you. Try once to walk unhurriedly, to hear the wind, the leaves, the sound of your feet touching the ground. Try once to drink a cup of tea in silence, to feel the warmth and the spreading aroma. These small actions are the art of slow living, the path that brings us back to our innate peace. The Buddha taught that true happiness doesn't lie in how much we possess, but in how we live each moment. A person with much wealth, but a mind constantly busy and comparing, can never find peace. Conversely, a person who lives simply, appreciating every moment, will feel rich in spirit, even if their material conditions are not abundant. You see, suffering often doesn't come from external factors, but from letting time slip away unconsciously. If we know how to stop, how to breathe, how to smile, happiness will immediately be present. Mindfulness is the key that opens the door to peace. So, let's practice slowing down, my friend. Not to neglect everything, but to truly be present with life. When we know how to dwell in the present, every breath becomes a miracle. Every step overflows with joy. And then we will realize that happiness is not far away, but present, right in this very moment. My dear friend, in the flow of life, perhaps all of us have experienced days when our minds were heavy, that we couldn't find rest. Some, due to financial worries, work pressure, or overly high expectations, cannot get a full night's sleep when night falls. Others, due to broken relationships, unfulfilled affections, or constant anxiety in their hearts, lie awake with wide-open eyes in the darkness. Sleep, inherently a peaceful sanctuary for body and mind, becomes a luxury. And when unable to sleep, the body grows weary, the spirit exhausted, and all suffering seems to multiply exponentially. People often say one sleepless night is a wasted day. Yet for many, that condition persists, not for one night or 1 week, but for months, even years. No one wants to bear that suffering, yet countless people are enduring it. The Buddha once taught that the deep root of all suffering is an unpeaceful mind. This is because the mind is bound by greed, anger, and delusion. Tham, san, si. By unfulfilled desires, by endless comparisons, calculations, and attachments. Sleep is stolen not only by external factors, but by an inner self full of turmoil. When the mind is not at peace, wisdom will not shine. The body, consequently, becomes ill. In the Four Noble Truths, the noble truth of suffering clearly states that the nature of life is suffering. But the Buddha didn't stop there. He also pointed out the noble truth of the origin of suffering, and the cause of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, the possibility of ending suffering, and the noble truth of the path to the cessation of suffering, the path to peace. That path is the path of meditation, mindfulness, letting go, and returning to the breath. The story of Mr. Dung is a relatable example. He was an office worker, constantly living under the pressure of work and the expectations of his superiors. Every day, he buried his head in ledgers, reports, and targets. Initially, he thought that if he just tried harder, he would be recognized and find happiness. But the more he tried, the more stressed he became, and then he suffered from chronic insomnia. Long, sleepless nights made him irritable and exhausted. His family, too, lost its peaceful atmosphere. His body was worn out, his mind uneasy. Life seemed to fall into a vicious cycle with no escape. One day, by chance, a friend invited him to a short meditation retreat. Initially, he was very skeptical, thinking, "How can meditation help me sleep well or solve my problems?" However, during the first session, sitting still and simply focusing on his breath, he realized that he had never truly lived in the present moment. His mind was always racing to the past, worrying about the future, completely missing the right now, this very breath. Gradually, he learned to breathe slowly, letting go of unnecessary thoughts, allowing his mind to dwell only on the rhythm of his incoming and outgoing breaths. Each breath was like a cool stream, washing away worries, soothing a heart parched by stress. Not long after, he began to sleep again. His sleep deep and peaceful. The miracle wasn't just that he regained his health, but that he realized happiness wasn't in completing another report or receiving an award, but precisely in his mind, finding peace, truly living in tranquility. Meditation is like a wholesome medicine that not only helps insomniacs find sleep, but also helps any of us heal the wounds in our hearts. It could be childhood wounds that haven't healed, professional failures, broken love, or the pressures society places on our shoulders. When our minds are still full of desires and attachments, these wounds fester endlessly without healing. But when we know how to be still, take a deep breath and gently exhale. It is also when layers of vexation gradually fall away, just as after a storm, the clouds disperse and light immediately appears in the sky. The wisdom inherent in each person is the same. Only when the mind settles down does wisdom shine brightly. If you too are carrying worries in your heart, this Buddhist Dharma channel invites you to try sitting quietly, placing your hand on your abdomen, gently closing your eyes, and taking a deep breath, Feel the breath entering, then gently release it. As you exhale, imagine that all your worries, stress, and heaviness are also leaving your body and mind with that breath. Try to maintain that focus for a few minutes each day. You will find your mind gradually settling and your body feeling lighter. Meditation is not something profound or mysterious. It is simply a way to help us return to ourselves, return to the present, living each moment fully. We often think that to find peace, we need to change our circumstances, need to have more things. But in truth, peace has never been external. It inherently resides within each person's soul. A soul that knows how to desire less, knows how to stop to listen to its breath, knows how to accept the impermanence of life. That is a soul no longer swept away by the waves of existence. The Buddha once compared a peaceful mind to a clear lake, reflecting everything without being disturbed by external circumstances. When we practice meditation, we are gradually clarifying that lake of the mind, allowing the light of wisdom to shine through and guide us. And perhaps the lesson from Mr. Dung's story is also a lesson for all of us. Sometimes we don't need to chase anything more. Simply stopping, breathing, and listening to ourselves is enough. Amidst the hustle and bustle of life, give yourself a moment of stillness. Let meditation become a companion, so wounds can be soothed, the soul can heal, and the wisdom inherent within us has a chance to manifest. Because when the mind settles, suffering naturally dissipates, and the light of peace will guide us further on the path to tranquility. My dear friend, now that we have journeyed together through a long path, from the sufferings caused by excessive desire to the understanding of the nature of craving, and then finding liberation through letting go and practicing meditation, perhaps what remains is a simple conclusion. When the mind desires less, suffering immediately dissipates. It sounds simple, but to achieve it requires a whole process of awakening, daily training, and especially a firm belief in the Buddha's teachings. In life, countless people still believe that happiness must come from achieving more, possessing more, surpassing others. They plunge into the whirlpool of competition, pursuing material things, status, and relationships, without realizing that this very boundless desire has become the cause of their suffering. The more they desire, the more they feel they lack. The tighter they cling, the more anxious they become. How many people live in large houses, but their hearts are constantly constricted by worry? How many people have abundant money, but are still apprehensive, fearing loss? How many people have complete relationships, but still pine with fear of separation? All these situations share one point. The mind refuses to stop, refuses to know contentment. And when the mind doesn't know contentment, happiness never truly exists. It's just a fleeting shadow. The Buddha once taught that suffering originates from craving, from endless desires, as outlined in the Four Noble Truths. The noble truth of the origin of suffering clearly points out the cause of suffering. It is greed. It is endless desire. But the Buddha did not abandon sentient beings. Instead, he presented the righteous path to end suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, and the noble truth of the path to the cessation of suffering. And among countless practices, knowing contentment and knowing how to let go are the keys to opening the door to peace. When we know contentment, we no longer chase illusions, no longer allow ourselves to be swept away by life's storms. When we know how to let go, we feel as light as someone setting down a heavy burden after a long journey. I recall a story about an elderly woman in a poor rural village. She lived in a small house with an old tiled roof, possessing little beyond a few acres of rice fields and some simple belongings. But whenever someone visited, she would always smile kindly, pour a hot cup of tea, and say, "I lack nothing. I have food to eat, a roof over my head, children and grandchildren. That's enough." People were surprised because, compared to urban life, she had nothing of value. Yet, when sitting with her, everyone felt an extraordinary peace, as if joy radiated from her very heart. Perhaps that is the clearest proof of the Buddha's teachings. Happiness doesn't lie in what we have in hand, but in how our minds perceive it. Her story makes me think of those in the city who have abundant material possessions, yet still feel they lack something. The difference is not in circumstances, but in attitude. A contented person finds peace even in poverty. A greedy person is uneasy even in wealth. And then, the greatest wealth is not money, but when we achieve peace in our souls. My dear friend, perhaps you are tired from work, anxious about relationships, worried about your children, or disheartened by failures. All these things are part of life that no one can avoid. But try to look back. Is it possible that by placing too many desires, you are binding your own soul? If you learn to let go a little, to breathe slower, to live more simply, perhaps suffering will no longer feel so heavy. For as the Buddha once taught, happiness doesn't come from having more, but from desiring less. Then happiness will naturally manifest. So how do we practice reducing desires? First, try to look deeply into your wishes. See which ones are truly necessary and which are merely driven by greed. Once identified, you will gradually know how to let go of unnecessary things. Next, practice living mindfully, meaning living fully in the present, not letting your mind be swept into the past or worrying about the future. And most importantly, learn to be grateful every day. Remind yourself to be thankful for what you have: health, loved ones, a warm home, a meal. When you are grateful, you will find life becomes richer, and desires will naturally subside. This journey may not be easy, but persistence itself brings sweet fruits. Think of the image of a sower. Today, planting a seed of gratitude. Tomorrow, planting another seed of letting go. Gradually, the garden of your soul will bloom. That flourishing is given by no one, nor can it be taken by anyone, because it blossoms from your own awakened awareness. When we desire less, we live lighter, more peacefully, and happiness arrives naturally, like a cool breeze. Remember that suffering is not destiny, but merely the result of how we perceive and cling. Let go of a part of your desires, and you will let go of a part of your suffering. Completely let go of desires, and you will see that suffering no longer has a reason to exist. And now, after all that we have shared together, I just want to convey one simple message. I wish for you, for me, for all of us, to find peace within our own inner selves. Even if there are storms outside, even if life brings countless changes. As long as our hearts are at peace, every place is a pure land. As long as our minds know contentment, every day is a happy day. And when the mind desires less, suffering will naturally dissipate.